In 1997, Final Fantasy VII was released on the original PlayStation and quickly became one of the most iconic games ever. It was a massive RPG with dozens of hours of gameplay, the first entry in the series to go fully 3D, a well-crafted story about how capitalism's endless pursuit of profits is bleeding the earth dry, and a cast of characters that is still beloved to this day. It was a game that was so revered that decades after its release, fans begged for a remake that used updated technology to help realize a version of Midgar that was more realistic and give its cast the voices they deserved. There was one event in the game's story that left a permanent mark on gamers that still exists to this day: the shocking and tragic death of one of the game's most important characters, Aerith. At the end of the first 3 discs, Aerith is cruelly impaled by the game's antagonist Sephiroth. Up until this point, dying in Final Fantasy VII was the same as any other game. It was a stumbling block in the road that existed to tell you that you either made a mistake somewhere or that maybe you're not quite equipped for a certain battle yet. Aerith was meant to die here. This is what director Yoshinori Kitase wanted, and it was supposed to mean something. Aerith was a character that players grew attached to quickly. She was written as someone that's kind towards everyone, funny, smart, and easy to like. There was a potential budding romance between her and the protagonist, Cloud. She had enough presence that when she was gone, the void was felt by everyone, including the player. It was a moment that shook everyone, enough that players who experienced it banded together and tried to figure out whether it's possible to prevent Aerith from dying. There were rumors that circulated around in games magazines, forums, and in playgrounds across the world that it was possible to keep her alive by performing certain tasks, such as playing her theme song on a piano at the Shinra mansion, or leveling every character to level 99 before the events unfold, but none of them were true. Some people found ways of adding her back to your party with a third-party cheat device like a Game Shark, but she was still absent from the story. She just existed in your party like a ghost that you could fight alongside with. Maybe this brought some people comfort, but it also became a reminder that she wasn't truly alive. This wasn't the first time a main character in a video game died though. It happened before, even in earlier games in the series, such as Galuf in Final Fantasy V. But Final Fantasy VII was a big deal. It was a cultural touchstone in the world of gaming and media as a whole, and its willingness to kill off a character that was so endearing, so important, and at a point in the story where you'd already gotten attached to her was a huge gut punch. Aerith was gone. And in a medium where a game over screen or a big "you died" banner gets plastered over the screen over and over again, it was interesting to see the death of one character have such a profound impact. True death is something rarely seen in games. It's a medium which frequently provides you with the means to survive for as long as possible to avoid a setback, where you're expected to develop your skills so that few enemies are able to keep you from seeing the credits roll. Death as a concept is something that's been explored in every creative medium to varying results. Video games, though, are the only artistic medium in which death is most often just a mechanic, a fail state, and when it's part of the narrative, usually it's a boss or the big bad that gets the chop after you beat them. When death comes for a character you actually control though, it can be more impactful in ways that are rarely accomplished by movies and novels, etc. In this video I want to focus on what I will call narrative death, which in this context is referring to a being in a video game that dies because whoever wrote the story decided that this is their fate. Whether this is something unavoidable and baked into the game's narrative, or a result of your decisions like in games such as Baldur's Gate 3, The Witcher 3, or narrative-heavy games like Telltale's The Walking Dead and the Life is Strange series. Let's have a look at the different categories of death found in video games. Firstly, there's temporary death. which is by far the most common type you'll find in almost every game. It's a minor inconvenience which happens because you ran out of health and your character then expires, only to respawn moments later at a nearby checkpoint. It's a punishment for making too many mistakes, and in games such as the Dark Souls series and Elden Ring, death is seen as a learning experience, where every new attempt at life is an opportunity to assess how you died and how it can be avoided again. Each death is a setback, but it's not the end. Then there's permadeath, something commonly found in TTRPGs or tactical turn-based role-playing games such as the XCOM and Fire Emblem series. XCOM in particular gives you characters to control that don't play a significant role in the narrative, and they're just soldiers that you can level up by having them fight for you. They can gain new skills and in time become an incredibly valuable member of your squad. If you make just a couple of mistakes in combat though, they can fall and permanently die. You often can't revive them in these games, they're just gone. And all that time that you invested in them is gone with them. It can be quite sad to lose a squad member that you've become so reliant and attached to, so the void can be felt. But it was your decision that led to it happening, giving players a bit of a tinge of guilt. This type of death belongs to the narrative that the player is creating themselves, but not something that the story decided should happen. It's effective enough that many modern TTRPGs have provided options to players which allows them to rewind their last few turns to undo their mistakes and potentially keep a character alive. Recent entries in the Fire Emblem series also allow you to choose from the options to turn off permadeath completely, something that's attractive to a lot of players since the games also give you the ability to grow your squad by developing a personal relationship with them. Even without this option though, these are still games where if all goes wrong, you can still reload your last save and try again, even with older titles. Some games such as the Diablo series and The Last of Us Parts 1 and 2 have optional permadeath modes, which are included to entice more hardcore players who want an additional layer of challenge. Unlike in regular modes, if you die once, then that is the end of your run, and you have to start again from the beginning. If you close the game and return to it later, then you can resume from where you left off, but if you die, you can't return to a recent save. Once again though, this isn't part of the core narrative. It offers a layer of realism that the other modes don't have, but when you die in permadeath modes, it's more of a blow to the ego as opposed to a narrative beat. Finally, there's narrative death, where a character dies as part of the game's story, either as a result of the player's choices or something predetermined to happen regardless of what the player does. It is by far the most impactful type of death in games, and I want to discuss how it's handled in a couple of titles, namely Red Dead Redemption 2 and Cyberpunk 2077. In general, when you die in games, it's fairly meaningless, and it's made that way because you're able to come back to life within moments of dying. This is just how games work though, it's a necessity. If you paid $70 for a game and died halfway through and found that it either won't let you continue playing or you have to start from the beginning, most people would be justifiably annoyed. Feeling tangible progress in your skills and character development through statistical gains is important. Games keep players engaged by rewarding them with consistent growth, and to have that taken away due to a mistake or a difficulty spike you weren't prepared for can be deflating and make you want to put the game down for good sometimes. Roguelike games do have a system that's similar to permadeath, where you're sent back to the beginning and you don't have a checkpoint to return to where you died. Games like Dead Cells, Hades, and Hades 2 are a few of the many examples of this. Your ability to return to life is also baked into the narrative, like in Hades 2, where you play as Melinoe, a goddess who's technically immortal. As you progress through the game, you pick up randomized buffs to increase the power of your skills, but when you die, you lose them all. Hades 2 and games like it give players the feeling of progress through death, since it opens up the narrative some more by speaking to NPCs multiple times, and there are minor but very useful buffs that you can acquire over time that you can hold on to permanently. Death is a setback, but it's a motivator too. You get knocked off the horse, and then you get back on it, learning something new with each fall. Death as part of the narrative is perhaps the most impactful though, at least for those who actually pay attention to the story and don't just skip cutscenes. I don't understand why you would do this, but if I'm describing you, please stop. You're missing out. There's about to be some spoilers for Red Dead Redemption 2 here, same for Cyberpunk 2077 later on, but if I'm honest, these games have some years behind them now, so you probably already know them, even if you haven't played them. Sorry for interrupting, but I've been told that this is a good point to say that this video was made possible with the kind support of my Patreon members. If you'd like to support future content and get early ad-free access to my videos, along with, helping me live, then visit the link in the description. Also, hang out with me at twitch.tv/jsalari because I am fun, goddammit. Anyway, back to the video. Red Dead 2 is a very long game, and throughout the majority of its runtime, you play as Arthur Morgan, a man who's part of the Vandalind Gang, a group of outlaws looking to make it on their own after growing disgruntled with the new and hypocritical version of American civilization. They believe that it has become a country which no longer allows people to truly live free and has only been able to flourish through colonization and exploitation. To reach their goal, the gang, including Arthur, frequently robs from the rich while attempting to evade the law and living on the outskirts of society. During our time playing as him, Arthur meets all kinds of people, some bad, some evil, some good, and some trying their best to be good, all trying to survive and hopefully thrive in a country which promises prosperity but rarely rewards those who choose to remain honest. America is a land that was birthed through bloodshed in the name of freedom and liberty, and although many Americans to this day believe that crushing your enemies is the cost of protecting your freedom, Arthur's journey teaches him that there are those who simply want to coexist, but have been demonized via propaganda and the fear of the other. The story of Red Dead Redemption 2 is incredibly rich and has no end of themes that could be explored in greater depth, something I might do someday in a separate video, but for now I want to talk about Arthur's fate and why it had such a profound impact on many players, myself included. As Red Dead Redemption 2 unfolds, Arthur and the others in the gang begin to question Dutch, not just his sanity, but whether he was ever the visionary that he claimed to be. For Arthur, who was raised by Dutch since he was a teen, the betrayal cuts deepest. The man who once had the answer to all of life's great questions slowly unravels before his eyes, shattering Arthur's world. Arthur's pain is compounded by the return of Mary Linton, a former love. Their feelings briefly rekindle, and he begs her to wait until he and Dutch fulfill their dream, but she knows it's a fantasy. Later, Mary sends a final letter, ending things for good, along with a ring that hints that they were once engaged. It's a quiet, devastating reminder of the life that Arthur gave up for a man who never deserved his faith. What truly makes Arthur's story devastating, though, is that late into the game, after returning from a grueling experience in foreign lands, he becomes ill. As you navigate the city streets of Saint-Denis, Arthur has a coughing fit, one which is so severe that the player can't make him move, and any health restoratives that you have don't have any kind of effect. A kind stranger assists Arthur in getting to a nearby doctor, and after an examination he tells him that he has tuberculosis. This happens in 1899, a time in which antibiotics didn't exist yet, so back then TB was basically a death sentence. Everything changes at this point for both Arthur and the player. He's a dead man walking, and this is something that you and everyone in the game's world has to come to terms with. No matter what you do, Arthur will die, but Red Dead 2 doesn't use this event just to add a timer to the story's events. It's an opportunity for Arthur and you to reflect upon the life that he has led up until now. Arthur now knows that he hasn't lived a life filled with goodness. He's done some good deeds and helped many people, but much of what he's done has been self-serving and sometimes cruel. These actions were justified by Dutch as a means to an end, since, as he likes to remind people,
we still need money.
Arthur has a conscience though, and with his body failing him, he takes inventory of the kind of person that he's been and the kind of person he wants to be remembered as. You get a say in Arthur's legacy. You can go out of your way to help the people that you've wronged without expecting compensation in return. There are some instances where you can even give people considerable amounts of money that you've amassed throughout the story playthrough to help them rebuild their lives. What makes moments like these more impactful though is that you are the one who's trying to help Arthur find redemption. You have been in charge of Arthur and his actions for dozens of hours up until this point, and you're being reminded of the consequences. Arthur's life will come to an end soon, and by controlling him, you're complicit in the kind of person that he is, the person that he will die as. Arthur's illness and deterioration is expressed through gameplay and presentation too. His skin is pallid, his eyes are bloodshot, which is difficult to see after becoming so familiar with his face. If you eat anything, it isn't as beneficial as it was prior to his infection. He coughs heavily after he's done eating, and it's extremely difficult to keep him from being underweight. There are times where, after physically demanding tasks, Arthur has to rest, and he refuses to move regardless of your controller inputs. He just sits there with labored breathing, wheezing, and coughing. It's painful to watch. It's a reminder that the end is coming for him, and it's only going to become more difficult the more he keeps going. Part of you wants him to simply leave the gang and hole up in a warm cabin so he can at least have some peace and comfort for the rest of his days, but he chooses to make those days meaningful at the cost of living a shorter life. Player disempowerment isn't uncommon in games. It's often used to raise the stakes or emphasize the direness of a situation, but in Red Dead 2 it feels so drawn out and so affecting. When you're disempowered in other games, it's usually for a brief period, and sometimes it's so close to the ending that it doesn't have the time to mean as much. You spend potentially dozens of hours with Arthur as a dying man. You watch his world fall apart as it happens. Everything he fought for is being lost, and him dying feels like a cruel extra flourish. You grow close to Arthur, and by the time the end comes, you guide him towards the final moments of his life. You feel the loss. This person that you spent so much time with is now gone. The game and the story has taken him from you, and this current version of him will never exist again. His absence is profound. When the game enters its epilogue and you take control of John Marston, the person that Arthur spent his final moments saving, he and everyone that you encountered before remember Arthur. He was someone that lived and was very dear to many. It feels real enough to move people to tears. Cyberpunk 2077, while lacking the gravitas of Red Dead 2, still contemplates mortality through its narrative. Early in the game, your character V unknowingly inserts a data shard containing the engram of Johnny Silverhand, a rock star and extremely enthusiastic activist. I probably can't say what it really is. A man that died 50 years ago after his consciousness became digitized by Arasaka, the world's largest and most powerful corporation. Following a fatal gunshot wound after a heist, this engram revives V. However, the shard cannot be removed, and Silverhand's consciousness begins to overwrite V's. Eventually, V will lose their identity entirely as Silverhand unwittingly takes over, a process inherent to the shard's design and seemingly irreversible. Thus, the game explores the meaning of life when faced with inevitable death and potential loss of self. This doesn't stop V from trying though. Their journey throughout Cyberpunk is motivated by their desire to avoid having their sense of self erased, which for all intents and purposes is death. They try to find anyone that's remotely close to Arasaka, the company that created Soul Killer, which is the technology that digitizes and copies a person's consciousness, then erases it from the host. V puts their life on the line to speak to the people that worked on Soul Killer to see if there's any way to halt its progress and save their life, and along the way they're joined by the ghost of Johnny Silverhand, who most of the time is a bit of a prick. But over time you learn more about him, and from him V gains an understanding of what it means to die and what kind of legacy you leave behind. It does make you wonder though, are the two learning to understand each other, or is this a product of the shards' programming? After all, their sense of self is being erased by another self. Johnny is forgotten by most of the world. His band Samurai is only remembered by aging rockers that are living in the past, and the ones that knew him personally mostly recall how much he pissed them off. When he died, he assumed he was doing so with purpose, but now that he's able to see the world 50 years later, he learns that his attempts to change the world didn't really amount to anything. He tried to bite a chunk out of the world's largest and most powerful corporation, but Arasaka still exists, and it's bigger than it ever was. Johnny has become jaded in death. He tried to go out in a blaze of glory and was willing to die for something that he believed in, but it didn't seem to matter. His nihilism conflicts with V's desire to continue to exist as themselves, to buy more time to leave their mark in a world where legends rarely live very long. There are moments in Cyberpunk which use player disempowerment to express V's health deterioration. They become weakened and ill, and they're forced to stop where they are until they recover. These moments come with the opportunity to talk to Johnny and present you with conversation choices that represent how V is coming to terms with their situation. They can push back against what Johnny says in an effort to preserve themselves, they can embrace him wholeheartedly, or there are options which are closer to the middle, suggesting that the two are finding some level of symbiosis. Cyberpunk 2077 has several different endings, and the one that you see is determined by your choices. I'm not going to go over each one of them, but they are all true to Cyberpunk as a genre, in that none of them have a truly happy ending. Most of the outcomes involve V either going out in a blaze of glory, passing control of their body over to Johnny, existing purely in cyberspace as data, or accepting their inevitable end. Many people who have played Cyberpunk have voiced their dissatisfaction with these outcomes, believing that there should have been an ending in which V gets cured and is able to live out the remainder of their life without any consequences. There are endings where V gets cured, but they're arguably among the worst outcomes. One involves them having the engram removed and destroyed, which erases Johnny Silverhand in the process. They become a test subject for Arasaka, being told what to do by scientists every single day with no end in sight. They live, but it's a miserable experience. When the Phantom Liberty expansion was released, players learned that there would be an additional ending in where V gets to live, but once again, it comes with a high price. After V is cured, they enter a coma that lasts for 2 years. Upon waking up, they find that not only have they lost all of their augmentations, which gave V their strength and abilities, but they can also never use them again, which in the world of Cyberpunk can be a huge hindrance. The people in V's life also weren't aware of them being in a coma since the operation was performed under top secret conditions. Because of this, many of V's friends assumed that they had died or ran away. Upon calling their friends and potential romantic partner, V learns that everyone has moved on with their life, or are pissed off by them for disappearing without a trace. V gets to live, but it doesn't feel possible to live a meaningful life anymore. Everything you did to get to this point, which was fueled by the fear of non-existence, can never be recreated again. You're left to wonder whether V would have been better off accepting their death, because even though their life would have been shorter, it could have been richer, knowing that it could be spent with the people they love. Given that you've been stripped of your augmentations, you also feel so much more vulnerable. Before, you were able to defend yourself by using powerful abilities, strengthening your body with armor, and even control the world around you with hacking skills. Now you're just human, living in a world in which almost everyone is augmented. V is unremarkable, powerless, and perhaps most importantly, vulnerable. They've avoided death, but now they're more fragile than ever in a dangerous world. It makes you wonder whether you made the right choice, if it was better to go out in a blaze of glory instead of living a quiet but difficult life. It's an opportunity for V to create a new version of themselves, but maybe this means that in some way V has already experienced loss, since their old self is now gone and can't return. So what makes mortality in games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Cyberpunk 2077 different to something like a movie, TV show, or a book where you know a character is going to die? I mean, we've all seen or read something where the death of a fictional character has affected us, but why do I think that games are so uniquely positioned to make dying so impactful? Well, I believe there's a couple of core reasons behind this. The level of familiarity you're able to establish with a character, along with the player having control over them, thus experiencing them sort of as a surrogate. In non-interactive media, your attachment to a fictional character is largely contingent on an author's ability to make them sympathetic through dialogue and visuals. It's something that is shockingly difficult to achieve, and I'm sure that any writer would agree with me on that. If you don't develop a character properly and efficiently, their death can end up lacking impact. It's something that happens in video games too, frequently in fact. Recently, I managed to play Stellar Blade, and spoilers I guess, but you really shouldn't care about this one. When Eve's comrade Taki dies, the game really wants you to feel sad, but fails miserably at invoking any emotional response. I don't know Taki. Eve is boring and her character is underbaked, and they never tell you what kind of relationship they had. It just leaves you to assume that it was meaningful. Do they ever go out to get ice cream? Do they have in-jokes? Do they share their feelings? Do they know that their busts spit in the eyes of the laws of physics and behave like two balloons tied to a fan? Who knows? But it's not surprising, since Stellar Blade's whole story is we have Nier Automata at home. A game like Red Dead 2, on the other hand, excels at making you feel something about Arthur's death, because the writers went to painstaking lengths to gradually teach about his past, while showing the kind of person he is now and how his history, along with the people he knows, has influenced his actions in the present. You get to know Arthur like you would a real person. You get some say in who he is and how he should respond to situations. The writers laid the groundwork and gave the player options to round out the person that he will become by the end. The options are binary, yes, but it's handled in such a way that both lead to a fitting conclusion. You can become a caring, selfless version of Arthur, or you could have him embrace a greater level of selfishness, resigning him to being the bad person that he believes that he is. If I'm honest though, I couldn't possibly picture Arthur as being the latter, and having played through Red Dead 2 3 times now, I've never been able to push myself to make Arthur become that bad person, because it's not who he is to me. The fact that I haven't been able to make him a bad person sort of serves as proof of the quality of characterization, that I've connected with Arthur on such a profound level that I couldn't even bring myself to debase him, even though he's not real. Interactive media where you are an active participant is special. It's also extremely complicated to create. A novel is just a novel. It's a few hundred pages with no branching paths and no consequences based on your choices, since you don't have any. A novel or a movie just happens to you. It unfolds in the fashion that the creator wants it to. Many games offer similar experiences and borrow from the myriad of tools that have been developed by storytellers for centuries, but participation is what intensifies the potency of a good story. You may have heard of The Hero's Journey by Joseph Campbell from his book The Hero with a Thousand Faces. It's a storytelling template that's been used hundreds, if not thousands of times throughout fiction. The original Star Wars trilogy is probably the most well-known example of it, but practically every modern superhero movie and shonen anime uses it religiously, and the reason for it is simple. It works, and it's compelling. It's a template that's also been used countless times in video games, and it's sometimes paired with game mechanics. You use those powers and all the skills that you've learned to overcome your greatest challenge, and that leads to the end. It's an incredibly simple and straightforward story structure, but by placing you in the shoes of the hero, it becomes your journey too. It allows you to experience something which you wouldn't be able to possibly do in real life. What you want for your avatar is something that you might want for yourself. Well-written characters in games serve as a useful surrogate. It's the same reason character customization is so popular, something which I discussed in a past video about gender expression in video games. So if you fancy watching that, check out the link in the top right. I know that in time the world at large will have a greater appreciation of the power of storytelling through mediums like video games, because it's able to do something that no other medium is capable of. I really love film. I've studied it at school and university. I have my favorite directors, cinematographers, editors, and writers. I'm one of the 20 people that still watches award shows. I can watch a 3-hour movie without ever taking my eyes off the screen, and it's a medium which has moved me in so many wonderful and profound ways. Film is something that's important to me, but I admit that it has its limitations, and as the technology and storytelling techniques in video games have advanced, the limits of other mediums have become more glaring. It doesn't make them inferior, not in the slightest, but it does excite me to think of what other great things can be achieved by games in the future. Maybe there are some brilliant minds out there that have yet to get the chance to express other human experiences that are enhanced by being interactive. In fact, I know there are. You might be one of them for all you know, but whoever you are and whatever ideas you have rolling around in your head, then I hope that one day you get to make them a reality, and I can't wait to try it out. But let me ask you, which game have you played that's truly moved you, and how do you think it achieved that? And if you'd be willing, I'd also like to hear how you think the medium of video games can be utilized to tap into our emotions. Oh, and don't forget the engagement stuff, like, subscribe, etc. Bye bye. Thank you for watching, and thanks to all the people who support the channel at patreon.com/Salari, including the following: Helen, Alex M, Sabo David, Freya Law, Quesadilla, Charlie, Rowan Ellis, Honey Lioness, Femgirl Aaron, Minty, Malcontent, Zoe B, Fishcatch, Mech, Jonathan Morris, Bailey Grevling, Catherine Pandel, Remy Allen, Grant B, Murgurger Fashionable, Azam, R Atoms, Games, Sparrowwagon, Syndrome Noir, Tadeo Deoria, Jay, Cami, Catherine, Nadine, Something Goofy, Carlin, Gina I, David, Jared S, Alexander Vanka, Vertex, Emily Argentine, Tanda, Locked In, Boring AF, Kev U, Velux, Patrick Giuseppe, Gertz Weinreich, Liberty Anyanaga, and Sumi, the Cat Godmother. Thank you all for your help and your generosity. Every penny goes back into making these videos. If you'd like to help as well and enjoy some benefits, click on the Patreon link in the description. You can also become a channel member if that's more of your thing. I also have a Discord, and you can follow me on Twitch, where I stream every week. Sorry for the long break between videos, but I was kicking a decade-long nicotine addiction, but thankfully I can now say that I am no longer an addict, so, you know, praise me, or whatever. Bye bye.